Well, you have no idea how weird it is that I'm giving this talk. I don't smoke, and edibles and I are not friends. The one time I did them, I pet a carpet for 3 hours with my mother. When I was growing up, marijuana is what the bad kids had, right? And now this isn't something I got from Reefer Madness. I didn't see that till I went to college. But in the 1980s, this is what I was told, legit told, that marijuana would do to me if I smoked it. Marijuana, the gateway drug for future Oscar winner Helen Hunt jumping out a window. I believed this. It was an after-school special. You believed this. The federal government spent $1 billion telling us to just say no, and my home state of California spent hundreds of millions of dollars to eradicate dope. Okay, so how did I come to do edibles with my mom? Well, my mom still lives in California, and she suffers from spinal stenosis. So she's in abject chronic pain. And the doctor said, finally, go to a dispensary. So we went to a dispensary. We bought a Tommy Chong chocolate bar, and we went home. And we had, in 10 minutes, 2 squares each. You're not supposed to do that. The last thing I remember before I pet the carpet was saying, "Mom, good luck." So what happened in the 40 years between Helen Hunt jumping out a window and me getting high with my mom? Legalization, right? Okay, first for medical, then for recreational, at the state level anyway. And we now are fluent in a whole new language. Light dep, flower, pre-roll, indoor, outdoor, CBD, everything. We've even gone from I didn't inhale to I inhaled, that was the point. You're familiar with some of these big brands, but what you're not familiar with are the people who started. You're not familiar with them because if they told you about themselves, they'd go to jail. I am talking about the original growers. The hippies, the hustlers, the advocates, the activists, the outlaws. They were on the right side of history, but the wrong side of the law. But the movement that they grew together fundamentally changed our world in all sorts of social and cultural ways. Now, what's interesting here is exactly how they grew it together and how it began. Frenchy Cannoli, that's a real person, you'll meet him in a little bit. Frenchy Cannoli, who's the prince of hashish, told me that everything changed in the Emerald Triangle because before this, you weren't smoking American. You were rolling Panama Red, Acapulco Gold. If you knew a surfer, you might get a hold of some Thai stick, which until recently I thought was a food truck, but it's actually a beloved strain. But up in those redwoods and in the mountains, Frenchy Cannoli said, it all transformed into something that became famous worldwide. And here are 3 OGs who've not been on camera before to tell you how they did it in the old days.
Right in, yeah. All balls.
That's what it was like.
I'm out delivering right now. I'm going to do 2 more deliveries.
I would go down to Tucson and with 2 of the biggest tourister suitcases. And those 2 touristers were full of weed. And, if you were nice to you ended up with all your stuff. If you didn't, some people ended up with empty suitcases.
Almost all of the herb that was sold was fronted. The farmer would give it to the broker and then they would disappear and then the farmer hoped the person came back. In normal business, if you have a dispute, you have the courts, you have the law enforcement, that didn't exist. So your reputation was really what held you.
Not only that, but these communities were really remote. They still are. So they really had to depend upon themselves. Now, when this started, cannabis was going for about $5,000 a pound. I think you know why. Price inflation, people, it was illegal. They made a lot of money, and they put it right back into their communities. They built schools, they built health clinics, they built community centers, and infamously, they built a community radio station called KMUD. Now, I can't prove this. I can just tell you the legend, but legend has it that KMUD, their playlist was actually a code to let growers know when the authorities were on their way to raid them. Which brings me to that eradication of dope program that I was mentioning. The state of California in 1983 stitched together 110 law enforcement agencies and used militarized tactics to eradicate dope. They started calling it dope. Well, the helicopters started flying in August, and they didn't stop until harvest was over in the fall.
We find business cards on our gate saying, "You grow and we'll get them."
I rolled in and there was the entire neighborhood was at the corner store, and I was just like, "What's everybody doing?" And they said, "Oh, we're watching them raid your property right now." And I'm like, "What?" And I look, and there's a helicopter lifting up out of my yard with a net full of weed flying off in the trees. And I was like, "Well, it's next time for me to have a drink."
Okay, so then this brings up the question, did they think they were doing anything wrong or that the government had it wrong? Well, Peter Childs, who was one of the original Back to the Land hippies, he told me that there's a difference between a criminal and an outlaw. A criminal means to do harm to someone. An outlaw operates outside the law, he said, but intends to do good. We were outlawed. Okay, well, the law actually doesn't, distinguish between the two. And this resulted in PTSD from these militarized raids, which still happen despite legalization. I can tell you right now, I've heard stories about their children being taken away on trumped-up charges of child endangerment. This also still happens despite state legalization. All these people that you just saw, they are all legal growers right now in the state of California. But what's really discouraging for them is how hard it's become. They poured their life savings into coming up to regulations and filing paperwork and getting all the legal help that they need. And they are going out of business. The price for cannabis has plummeted. I think right now I heard $100 a pound to show you how different it is. Here's the problem. And the rest of our agricultural industries, if you go belly up, you can file for bankruptcy protection, but you can't in cannabis, because it's not federally legal. As Kevin Jodrey told me, it feels like the policy was designed to scrub us out. Well, now they can't be scrubbed out because they told me, I'm making a movie, and I told you. What struck me the most and continues to is the undistilled joy with which they regard their life's work. They take pride in the fact that they have helped people health-wise, in terms of with their PTSD from military veterans or AIDS patients who were suffering through the 80s and 90s. And they truly believe that they have helped humanity by bringing us together for a shared experience, whether it's in your home or on some of the biggest stages. Frenchy Cannoli, who I mentioned earlier, who passed away this last fall. When he passed away, interestingly, the New York Times and The Economist both wrote obituaries for him. One of the things he said to me was that cannabis, even though it made him an outcast, even though it made him a menace to society, he said it was the key to a sense of belonging. It was the purest positive energy and absolute joy. When I think about the OGs, this is what I think about. They lived big, they grew big, they had a lot of fun, and no regrets.
Well, old school is no more.
Honestly, will be footnotes in a tale that went on for 14,000 years, but a good footnote.
I will wrap it up by telling you something I wasn't going to mention, which is let's go back to my mom. After our terrible experience with the Tommy Chong chocolate bar, my mother now has a delivery service. And the gummies are working out. Thank you guys very much.